Here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman as we turn now to what's been described as one of the most startling police corruption scandals in a generation.
Few cities embody American urban decay more depressingly than the city of Baltimore.
Baltimore struggles with a record-high murder rate.
In Baltimore, Maryland, closing arguments are scheduled to begin today for two Baltimore police officers who face racketeering, conspiracy, and robbery charges. Talk about how long this went on for.
Years. Some say it may have been up to 10 years, but some say at least 5 years that this was going on.
Murder rates in the city of Baltimore skyrocketed in 2017. With 56 killings per 100,000 people, a new record for a city that already has a reputation for being dangerous and crime-ridden.
The officers were part of an elite plainclothes unit called the Gun Trace Task Force. But according to prosecutors, the unit acted more like a criminal outfit. In his opening argument during the trial, the lead federal prosecutor, Leo Wise, said, quote, "They were simply put both cops and robbers."
And that's why it's important, Amy, because this was not uncovered by the Baltimore State's attorney. This was not uncovered by City Hall. This was not uncovered by Internal Affairs. In fact, the police officers who testified this week said that Internal Affairs was just part of the culture.
Murder is out of control.
Yes, Baltimore, there is a robust, active crime strategy.
Quote, "They were simply put both cops and robbers. We're giving them a badge and a gun tomorrow, the right to take someone's life.
That's right.
If it calls for it. And they have not demonstrated they can meet basic constitutional and legal standards."
Where's he? He's running. Right here. He's going behind us. Go behind us.
They were simply put both cops and robbers.
If you're we talked about good apples and bad apples. If you're a good apple, I mean, what we're hearing this week, the revelations in this trial suggest that no good apple could prevail in that environment. In fact, there's one officer who was a new recruit, new trainee, went out with one of these seasoned officers, and when it was clear that he would not rob drug dealers, he was no longer asked to be part of the task force.
Quote, "They were simply put both cops and robbers." Leo Wise said, quote, "They were simply put both cops and robbers." This corruption trial has the potential to reframe our entire national conversation about law enforcement and minority communities.
Absolutely.
An elite group of plainclothes officers were supposed to be reducing violence and crime. However, it now seems they have actually been adding to it.
Quote, "They were simply put both cops and robbers."
And this demonstrates the way in which communities have been preyed upon by officers in ways that make them unwilling to trust the police. They will not call and say, "This is what I saw." They will not be witnesses. They will not trust those who claim they need their help to solve crimes. So until we deal with that issue, until we deal with the legitimate distrust of the community towards law enforcement because of officers like those in this task force, we can't get to the kind of public safety outcomes that everyone wants.
6 out of 8 members of the group pleaded guilty to charges of organized crime, including extortion and drug dealing.
For months now, the court system has been trying to investigate corruption within the city's police force.
They were simply put both cops and robbers.
8 officers are on trial over drug trafficking, racketeering, robbery, and planting fake evidence like drugs and BB guns.
We would create false reports to cover up the robberies we were involved in.
The officer charged with training the police recruits in legal standards that govern their conduct, announced on Friday that a third of the recruits set to graduate that weekend, last weekend, had failed the tests, the basic scenario training tests that govern their knowledge of the legal standards under which they are to operate. That is, probable cause for arrests and so forth. A third of the recruits. Now, this is not Cheryl and Eiffel who said this. This is the officer charged with training the recruits who rings the alarm bell and warns that a third of them are not ready. They graduate anyway on Saturday.
It was like a way of life. We got away with a lot of things.
They were simply put both cops and robbers. According to prosecutors, the officers stole hundreds of thousands of dollars from city residents. They broke into houses, they stole drugs, then gave them to drug dealers. They carried BB guns that they could plant on people they shot. 6 members of the task force have already pled guilty. Baltimore State's attorney has already dropped at least 125 criminal cases related to the task force, but many more convictions have been called into question.
It was like a way of life. We got away with a lot of things.
If proven guilty, the officers may face 20 to 100 years in prison.
They were simply put both cops and robbers.
And 6 of them have already pleaded guilty and are now acting as witnesses in hopes of softening the looming verdict. And their lawyers claim the officers feel guilt over what they've done.
They were simply put both cops and robbers.
Mr. Jenkins is extremely remorseful. He's been remorseful for a long time, even before these charges were brought. And he's relieved that today, finally, he was publicly able to accept responsibility.
The officer charged with training the police recruits in legal standards that govern their conduct announced on Friday that a third of the recruits set to graduate that weekend, last weekend, had failed the tests, the basic scenario training tests that govern their knowledge of the legal standards under which they are to operate. That is, probable cause for arrests and so forth. A third of the recruits. Now, this is not Cheryl and Eiffel who said this. This is the officer charged with training the recruits who rings the alarm bell and warns that a third of them are not ready. They graduate anyway on Saturday.
Meanwhile, officers' cases continue to be dismissed, with hundreds under review. And most of them involve incidents of officers switching off their body cameras to plant drugs or guns and then reenact seizing the evidence they had already planted.
Quote, they were simply put both cops and robbers.
Are their clients sorry for what they did?
Of course he is. He's sorry.
Both cops and robbers.
Is he regretful of what happened?
I really don't have any comment.
Both cops and robbers.
But it begins with confronting the problem. And the problem is not just that there's violence in the community, which is how it's too often framed by city leaders. The problem is that there are also problems in the police department. Even the Fraternal Order of Police came out the same day and said, you know, officers need better training to meet these constitutional standards.
They actually thanked the academy instructor.
That's right.
His name's Sergeant Josh Rosenblatt, yes. And he's quoted in the Baltimore Sun as saying, "We're giving them a badge and a gun tomorrow. The right to take someone's life.
That's right.
If it calls for it. And they have not demonstrated they can meet basic constitutional and legal standards."
Can it be more condemning? I mean, what a line that comes out of the police department, not from the outside. And so to me, that's a cry for help. For him to publicly say that, he is ringing the alarm bell. That even the police union can hear, that anyone can hear. And yet those officers graduated anyway.